The silence of a cell phone can be more deafening than the noise of a jackhammer breaking the pavement, especially when you are bedridden in a hospital waiting for the door to open. I am Connie. I am 68 years old, and all my life I worked organizing catering for other people's weddings. But it seems I was not able to organize even a little bit of compassion in my own flesh and blood. As the cab driver helped me unload my suitcase at the door of my empty house, I felt something harder than the titanium prosthesis in my hip. I felt my heart freeze. My name is Connie, although for the past 15 days that name felt like a bad joke, because consolation was the only thing I did not have. For 40 years I ran a catering company. I know what logistics are. I know what it is like to plan events for 500 people without a single napkin missing, and I know what discipline is. That is why, when the doctor told me the hip surgery was inevitable, I called my 3 children together. Robert, the oldest, who thinks he owns the world because he runs a hardware store, Allison, who is always living in a soap opera drama with her husband, and Mark, the youngest, who at 32 years old is still trying to find himself. The meeting took place in the dining room of my house, at that oak table I bought with my savings and where I served them breakfast every morning before they went to school. "Do not worry, Mom," Robert said, pulling out his digital planner with that self-importance he always carries. "We have it all covered. I made a schedule. I will cover the mornings, Allison will take the afternoons, and Mark has the nights. You will not be alone for a single minute." "It is the least we can do, Mommy," Allison added, holding my hand with her perfectly painted nails. "We will take turns. We are a team." Mark just nodded, eating the cookies I had baked despite the pain in my leg. "Sure thing, boss. We will be right there on the front lines." I believed them. I was stupid, a naive old woman, but I believed them. I checked into the hospital on a Monday morning. The surgery was a success, the doctors said. Waking up from the anesthesia, however, was the beginning of my true nightmare. I woke up in the recovery room with a dry mouth and a dull pain on my right side, as if I had been kicked by a mule. I looked around. I expected to see Robert with his serious face checking his watch, or Allison flipping through some gossip magazine, but I only saw a green curtain and a sturdy nurse changing my IV. Where is my family?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I am sure they are outside, Mrs. Connie. As soon as we move you to your room, they can come in," she told me with that sweet voice they use to calm down children and the elderly. They moved me to room 304. It was a shared room. The lady next to me, a woman named Betty who had just had gallbladder surgery, had her husband, 2 daughters, and 3 grandchildren crowded around her bed. There were balloons, there were flowers. There was noise. On my side of the room, there was only silence and an empty plastic chair. The first hour passed, then 2. I looked at my cell phone, which I had kept on the nightstand. Not a single call, not a single text. It must be the traffic, I thought. In this city, the traffic is terrible. Robert is probably stuck on the freeway and does not have any signal. Night fell. The hospital dinner arrived, a trembling Jell-O and some chicken broth that smelled like sadness. Betty, my roommate, looked at me with pity while her daughter fed her. "Is nobody coming to have dinner with you, neighbor?" she asked me. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. Shame is a horrible feeling at my age. You think you have lived through it all, but the shame of being abandoned is new, and it burns. "My kids work a lot," I lied, sitting up as best as I could. "They are executives, very important people. I am sure they will come first thing tomorrow." But tomorrow morning came, and the chair was still empty. Day 2. The pain in my hip was intense, but the pain of staring at the door every time someone walked down the hallway was worse. I grabbed the phone and called Robert. Voicemail, I called Allison. "Mommy," she answered, sounding out of breath. "Oh, please forgive me." The baby got a fever and I had to rush to the pediatrician, and then Luke's car broke down. Everything just got so complicated. But I will absolutely be there tomorrow, okay? I swear. "It is fine, honey. Do not worry," I said. What else was I going to say? I was not going to beg her. I am Connie, the woman who built a business from nothing when my husband died. I do not beg. I called Mark. What is up, Mom? Oh man, yeah, a last-minute emergency gig came up. You know how it is. But I told Robert to go. He did not go. Wow, that is messed up. I will drop by as soon as I can. Day 3, day 4. The nurses started looking at me differently. I was no longer just the patient in room 304. I was the poor thing in room 304. That look of pity pierces your skin deeper than the injection needles. Mrs. Connie, we need someone to bring you your personal hygiene items and some non-slip slippers, the head nurse told me on the 5th day. Do you want us to call someone? No, do not bother, I replied dryly. I will handle it. With trembling hands, I used a delivery app on my phone to order a package with soap, toothpaste, and clean underwear. I tipped the delivery guy extra so he would bring it all the way up to my room. When that unknown young man walked in with his motorcycle helmet under his arm and handed me the bag, Betty, who was already getting discharged, looked at me, and I saw her lower her eyes so she would not humiliate me further. The days turned into a gray blur. I learned to go to the bathroom by myself, dragging the walker, gritting my teeth so I would not scream in pain because I did not want to bother the nurses and have them ask me about my kids again. I became an expert at moving slowly, calculating every single inch. My pride was my best painkiller and my worst enemy. Day 12 was the breaking point. A new nurse came in, a young girl who did not know my situation. She was reviewing my chart and frowned. Excuse me, Mrs. Connie, it says here you have 3 emergency contacts. We have been trying to call them to authorize some extra pain medication, but nobody is answering. Do you actually have family, or are these old numbers? The question hung in the air, thick and toxic. Do you actually have family? I felt the tears stinging behind my eyes, but I swallowed them down. I swallowed them with the same strength I used to swallow my rage when my husband blew our savings on gambling 20 years ago. They are my children, I said. With a voice so cold the girl took a step back. They are out of town. International business. I will sign. I will authorize it. I am in charge of my own actions and my own money. I signed the paper with such force that I almost ripped the page. That night, I did not sleep. I took my small red notebook out of my purse. It is a worn leather notebook I take with me everywhere. That is where I used to write down client orders, the secret recipes for my sauces, and pending debts. I opened a new page. In my cursive handwriting, a little shaky but firm, I wrote, Day 1, nobody. Day 2, excuses. Day 5, pharmacy delivery paid for by me. Day 10, my grandson's birthday. I saw it on Facebook. A big party. Nobody let me know. Day 12. The nurse doubts I even have a family. I kept noting down every single detail, every lie they told me via text message. I will be there tomorrow. I am almost there. Something came up. My children's promises were like bad checks bouncing, and I was collecting all of them. On the 15th day, the doctor walked in, smiling. Well, Connie, you are a warrior. Your recovery has been excellent. Well, despite everything, we are discharging you. What time are they coming to pick you up? I looked at my watch. It was 10 in the morning. I had sent a message to the group chat we have, Family United. What an ironic name. I let them know I was getting out today. Robert wrote, Oh man, Mom, I have inventory. Can you wait until 6 in the evening? Allison texted. I cannot make it. The car is still at the mechanic. Mark did not even read the message. I looked the doctor in the eyes, lifted my chin, and smiled, a smile that did not reach my eyes. Do not worry, doctor. Everything is already taken care of. I am taking a cab. But ma'am, with your recent surgery, it is not recommended that you go alone. I have lived alone, and I have solved bigger problems than a broken hip, doctor. Let me sign the discharge papers. I want to go home. Leaving the hospital was an odyssey. the wheelchair ride to the entrance. The sunlight on the street hurt my eyes after 15 days of artificial light. The security guard helped me hail a cab. "Where are we heading, Mother?" asked the cab driver, an older gentleman with a gray mustache and kind eyes. "To 45 Oak Street, please. And I am not your mother, thank God," I replied, perhaps a bit too harshly. The man looked at me in the rearview mirror, and upon seeing my face, he understood it was not the time for small talk. The ride was pure torture. Every pothole was a sharp stab in my groin, but every stab reminded me that I was alive and that I was alone. And for the first time in my life, loneliness did not scare me. It gave me clarity. We arrived at my house. The front of the house looked the same, my rose bushes a bit dry from lack of water. The cab driver, a saint of a man, got out, took out my suitcase, and offered me his arm to walk to the door. "Nice and easy, boss, nice and easy," he told me. I gave him a generous tip, much more than what the meter showed. "Buy yourself something nice," I told him. He smiled at me and left. I stood there in front of the wooden door of my house. I looked for the keys in my purse. My hands were shaking, not from the pain, but from contained fury. I turned the key and pushed. The air inside the house was stale. It smelled like dust and confinement. I walked in, dragging my feet, leaning on the walker the hospital had sold me. "Hello!" I yelled, just in case. Just in case one of them had decided to surprise me and was hiding, waiting to jump out. "Welcome home!" The only response I got was the echo and the humming of the refrigerator. I moved toward the living room. Everything was exactly as I had left it 2 weeks ago. A half-finished cup of coffee on the table, with green mold floating in the black liquid. The blinds were closed. I went to the kitchen. I opened the fridge. Empty, except for a dried-up lemon and a jar of mayonnaise. They had not even bothered to take out the trash before I left, and now the kitchen reeked of rotting garbage. I collapsed into the kitchen chair, exhausted. The physical pain was strong, but what I felt in my chest was a blazing fire. My kids had promised. "We will take turns. You will not be alone." I looked around. I paid for this house, brick by brick. The food they ate for 30 years came from my hands, burned by hot oil and sliced by knives. I paid for their college. I paid for their weddings. I bailed Mark out of jail twice. And here I was with a metal hip and a broken soul, having to make my own tea because there was no one here to even boil water for me. But then, something changed. I stopped crying. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand filled with rage. I got up with effort and walked over to the desk where I keep my important documents. I took out the red notebook again. I opened it on the kitchen table. "All right then," I said out loud to the empty house. "You think I am some useless little old lady who is just going to sit around waiting until you have time for her. You think I am going to be grateful when you show up in 3 days with some cheap flowers and a dumb apology." I grabbed a pen. I did not write down complaints. I started doing the math. I added up the value of the house. I added up my savings in the bank, the ones I was keeping to help them out whenever they needed it. I added up my mother's jewelry. I added up the plot of land I own down south, the one Robert is always telling me to just give to him so he can build cabins. They did not know that, right before my surgery, I had sold my share of the catering business for a very substantial amount, an amount I was planning to divide among them while I was still alive, as a surprise when I got out of the hospital. I was going to give each of them a check so they could have financial peace of mind. I looked at the phone. It was still on silent. "They wanted an inheritance," I muttered, feeling a cold smile form on my face. "Well, they are going to get exactly what they deserve." I brewed myself some chamomile tea, sat in my favorite armchair, and looked out the window. The hip pain was still there, but now it had a purpose. I was no longer the self-sacrificing, long-suffering mother. Now I was Connie, the businesswoman, and I had just identified 3 employees who were failing to do their jobs. It was time to restructure the family business, and management was going to be ruthless. Right at that moment, the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be them? Were they sorry? I adjusted my robe, took a deep breath, and yelled, "Come in, it is unlocked." But it was not my children. What walked through that door chilled me to the bone and completely changed the plan that was just starting to take shape in my head. It was not a monster or a debt collector or the police. It was Mrs. Martha, my next-door neighbor, a woman older than dirt with eagle eyes that do not even miss a fly buzzing by. She was standing in the doorway with a stack of envelopes in her hand and a look of absolute distress that froze my blood more than the air conditioning in the operating room. "Oh, Connie!" she exclaimed, almost dropping the mail when she saw me leaning on the walker. "Thank God you are okay. I thought you were never coming back." "A bad weed never dies, Martha," I said, trying to keep my composure even though my hip was throbbing. "What is going on? Why the funeral face?" Mrs. Martha looked both ways down the street with that conspiratorial look of someone about to drop a massive bomb and stepped inside without asking for permission, closing the door behind her. "It is just that, look, I do not want to stick my nose where it does not belong." "But your kids?" She paused, wringing her hands in her apron. "They came by, Connie, 3 days ago." Robert and the youngest, Mark. I felt a ringing in my ears. They came? 3 days ago? That was day 12, the exact same day the nurse asked me if I even had a family. "Did they come to get me some clothes?" I asked, even though deep down in my gut I knew I was not going to like the answer. "No, honey, they did not look like they were here for clothes." Mrs. Martha lowered her voice. "They pulled up in the hardware store truck. They barged in, making a lot of noise. I went outside because I thought they were bringing you back. But no, I could hear drawers opening, furniture being dragged across the floor. They were in there for about 2 hours and walked out carrying some file boxes and that old bronze lamp you had in the entryway. Robert was yelling something about bank papers, and Mark was saying that the old lady probably hid them in the kitchen. I had to grip the rubber handles of my walker tight because my knees buckled, not from physical pain, but from the impact of the moral blow. While I was all alone staring at the white ceiling of the hospital and eating flavorless Jell-O, my kids, my own flesh and blood, were not busy working. They were right here, in my house, ransacking my memories and hunting for my money like vultures circling before the animal even dies. "Thank you, Martha," I said with a voice I did not even recognize, a hoarse, metallic voice. "Thank you for telling me. Just leave the mail on the table." When Martha left, I deadbolted the door. The sound of the lock clicking into place felt completely final. Click, click. That was exactly how my heart was locking up, too. I dragged myself to the kitchen. Martha had said they were looking in the kitchen. I looked around. At first glance, everything looked normal, but my event planner eyes, trained to notice if a fork was misaligned by a single fraction of an inch, caught the details. The flour canister had been moved. The spice jars were not in alphabetical order the way I always leave them. They had been searching. They had been rummaging through everything. The old lady probably hid them in the kitchen. I smiled. A bitter smile, but one full of satisfaction. Mark was right about one thing. I did hide the important things in the kitchen, my territory, my sanctuary. But those two, clumsy and impatient, were never going to find what they were looking for because they never paid any attention to my work. To them, the kitchen was just the magical place where free food came from. I walked over to the large pantry, the one I had custom built to store those massive industrial serving trays. With a lot of effort, I crouched down, ignoring the sharp pull on my surgical scar. I removed the wooden baseboard at the very back, right behind the 10-pound cans of crushed tomatoes that weighed a ton and that they would never bother to move. There it was, my small floor safe built right into the concrete. I dialed the combination, my first grandson's date of birth, the only innocent person in this entire story. The little heavy door opened with a soft click. Inside, there was no jewelry or loose cash. There was something much more powerful. I pulled out the blue leather folder. My hands, spotted from age and hard work, caressed the document. It was the sales contract for Connie's catering, the sale I closed exactly 1 week before I ended up in the hospital. The figure printed on the cashier's check, which I still had not deposited, had so many zeros it would make anyone dizzy. $2 million. $2 million free and clear, the product of 40 years of serving appetizers, carrying boiling pots and smiling at hysterical brides. They knew I wanted to sell, but they thought the business was barely worth anything. "Mom, that is obsolete now," Robert used to tell me. "Just sell the pots for scrap metal," Allison would mock. They did not know that my client list was worth its weight in gold, and above all, they did not know I had already sold it. I sat on the cold kitchen floor with the folder on my lap. The cold from the tiles seeped right through my robe, but it helped me think. For years, they made me feel small. "Mom, you do not understand technology." "Mom, let me handle that. You are already tired." "Mom, lend me some money for my car payment. The hardware store is just having a slow month." They had convinced me that I was a burden, a cute little old lady who made great chili but was no longer useful in the modern world. And silly me, I almost believed it. In the hospital, when no one came, I even started to think I deserved it. I thought, I am probably just a nuisance. I am sure they have more important things to do. How wrong I was. I am not a nuisance. I am the bank. I am the source of the money. And they just made the terrible mistake of trying to rob the bank while the branch manager was on a forced vacation. I opened the bank envelope that Martha had dropped off. It was the bank statement for my regular checking account, the one they knew about. The balance had dropped drastically. $1,000 were missing. The date of the withdrawal perfectly matched the day Mark said he had a last-minute emergency gig. He had a copy of my debit card for absolute emergencies. Of course, their emergency is always my money. I pulled myself up using the kitchen counter, panting heavily. The pain was a constant reminder. You are alive. You are furious. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I did not like what I saw, but it did not scare me either. I saw a woman with messy gray hair, deep dark circles under her eyes, and the pale skin of someone who had not seen the sun in weeks. She looked fragile. She looked like a victim. Perfect, I told my reflection. Let them keep seeing exactly that. If they thought the old lady was senile and helpless, I was going to use that right to my advantage. In the business world, I learned that when your opponent underestimates you, you have already won half the battle. They believed I was a wounded little lamb, waiting for them to come take care of me or to fleece me entirely. They did not know that the little lamb was actually an old she-wolf, and that the wolf had just woken up starving. I needed a plan. I could not just confront them by screaming. If I yelled at them, they would call me crazy, hysterical, ungrateful. They would play the victim, like they always do. Allison would cry and say I am a terrible mother. Robert would say he does everything for my own good. No, this required the precision of a 500-plate banquet. Everything in due time, everything calculated and served ice cold. I went back to the dining room table. I pulled out my cell phone. I had 3 new text messages in the Family United group chat. Allison wrote, "Mommy, how are you feeling? I cannot make it today." "I have a terrible migraine." Robert wrote, "I will definitely drop by tomorrow to see what the doctors tell you." Mark wrote, "Does anyone know where Mom left the keys to the Chevy?" They did not even know I was already home. Nobody had called the hospital to ask about my discharge. They just assumed I was still there, rotting away in a bed, giving them plenty of time to keep digging through my house. I wrote a reply. My fingers flew across the screen, but I deleted the message 3 times before finally sending it. It had to be the perfect message, innocent, pathetic. Finally, I typed, "My dear children, I am still here waiting. The doctors say I am very weak. Do not worry about coming today if you are busy. Just pray for me." I hit send. The lie flowed from my fingertips with an ease that honestly scared me, but it was completely necessary. I needed time. I needed to armor up my fortress before the barbarians tried to breach the gates again. The very next thing I did was look in my paper address book, the one I keep right next to the landline. I looked up the number of an old acquaintance, Arthur, the neighborhood locksmith. A man of very few words and a lot of discretion. "Hello?" answered a raspy voice. "Arthur, it is Connie. I need you to come over right now. It is urgent. And bring the most expensive and complicated deadbolts you have in stock. The heavy-duty kind that take 3 turns and a laser-cut key. I am on my way, Mrs. Connie. Did someone try to rob you?" "Something like that, Arthur. Something like that." While I waited for the locksmith, I made my second phone call. This one was a bit harder. I dialed the number for the private nursing agency we once hired for a millionaire client who needed care during a wedding reception. "Good afternoon, Angel Care Agency. I want to hire a 24-hour service," I said, staring right at my checkbook. "I want the biggest, strongest, meanest nurse you have on staff. Someone who will not even let the wind blow through my house without my explicit permission, and I am paying cash in advance." "We have Ms. Gretchen. She is a military veteran, highly efficient, but not much for small talk. Send her over right this minute." I hung up the phone and felt this incredibly strange sense of peace. The pain in my hip was still there, throbbing, reminding me of it with every step I took, but my mind was as clear as crystal water. I made myself a sandwich with the little food left in the kitchen. The bread was stale, but it tasted like absolute heaven. It tasted like pure independence. I ate slowly, chewing every bite as if I were chewing up my own weaknesses just to swallow them down and get rid of them forever. I looked at the empty living room. That living room where Robert learned to walk, where Allison had her first date, where Mark shattered a vase with a baseball. That house was filled with ghosts of a love that I gave completely unconditionally. A love they returned to me in the form of abandonment and sheer greed. But not anymore. The doorbell rang again. It was Arthur. He worked quickly and in total silence, swapping out the deadbolts on both the front and back doors. When he handed me the brand new keys, heavy and shiny, I felt like he was handing me a royal scepter of power. "Nobody gets in without these, Mrs. Connie," he told me. "Nobody, Arthur, not even if they share my last name." I paid him in cash, pulling the bills out of my emergency stash. Barely a minute after Arthur left, Gretchen the nurse arrived. She was a woman who looked like she was carved entirely out of granite, wearing an immaculate blue scrub uniform and sporting arms that looked like they could lift a pickup truck. She looked at me, looked down at my walker, and gave a sharp nod. "What are the orders, ma'am?" she asked, setting her duffel bag down in the entryway. "Nobody comes into this house, Gretchen. If anyone shows up claiming to be my child, you do not open the door. You alert me first, and if they try to use their keys, well, they are in for a nasty surprise." Gretchen cracked a tiny half smile. "Understood. Do you need assistance getting washed up or into bed?" "Yes," I admitted, finally letting my shoulders drop. "I need a bath, and I need to get some sleep. Tomorrow I have a lot of work to do." That night, lying in my own bed, wrapped in the clean sheets that Gretchen had helped me put on, I listened to the silence of the house, but it was no longer a lonely silence. It was the silence of absolute security. Downstairs in the living room, Gretchen was reading a book by a dim lamp. At the front door, the new heavy-duty locks gleamed in the dark, and safely tucked under my mattress, the blue folder with the sales contract rested securely. My children thought they were fully in control. They thought their poor mother was completely helpless at the hospital, just begging for breadcrumbs of their time. They thought they could just waltz in and out of my life and my home whenever they felt like it. Tomorrow, they were going to realize that the door locks were not the only things that had changed in this house. Tomorrow, phase 2 of my plan would officially begin. I was going to use their own ruthless ambition right against them. They wanted money. They wanted a massive inheritance. They wanted to be the masters of everything I built. Well then, I was about to give them a harsh lesson in business management that they would never, ever forget. I close my eyes, and for the first time in 15 long days, I slept without waiting for the phone to ring. But right before drifting off into a deep sleep, my cell phone vibrated on the nightstand. It was a text from Robert. "Mom, I am swinging by the house early tomorrow to grab some paperwork I need for my store's accounting. While I am at it, I will bring you some magazines at the hospital." I smiled in the pitch-black darkness. "Come on over, Robert. Come and get your paperwork." The door is locked tight, but the main event is only just beginning. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee has the incredible power to literally raise the dead, or at the very least, to return the soul to the body of a woman who just spent 15 days smelling nothing but cheap disinfectant and crippling loneliness. I open my eyes in my own bed, on the mattress molded perfectly to the shape of my spine over decades, and for a brief second, sheer panic flooded my system. I instinctively reached for the red hospital call button, but my fingers only brushed against the softness of my Egyptian cotton sheets. I was home. I was entirely safe, and most importantly, I was armed and ready. Gretchen, the private nurse who looked like a literal military tank wearing scrubs, marched into my bedroom holding a tray. She did not say good morning with that fake, bubbly cheerfulness of those young hospital nurses. She simply gave a sharp nod, placed the breakfast tray directly over my lap with pinpoint military precision, and cracked the curtains just enough to let a single ray of sunlight through, but not wide enough for anyone on the street to peek inside. "Nobody has approached the perimeter, Mrs. Connie," she reported in a gravelly tone. "The coffee is black, no sugar, exactly as indicated in your medical chart. I also brought you the cordless phone and your tablet." "Thank you, Gretchen. You are a true guardian angel with the face of a drill sergeant," I told her, taking a slow sip. The coffee was incredibly strong, dark, and piping hot, the absolute perfect fuel for a war. Today was the day for a totally silent execution. In the catering business, I learned very early on that the overall success of a massive event is never decided when the plates are finally served to the guests. It is decided hours beforehand, deep in the kitchen, when nobody is watching and the executive chef is quietly sharpening the butcher knives. My children assumed the game was exactly the same as always. Old mom, weak mom, overly generous mom. They had absolutely no idea that the daily menu had just drastically changed. The very first thing I did, long before the morning sun even had a chance to heat up the asphalt outside, was call Mr. Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds had been my personal attorney and notary ever since I became a widow. He is an old-school gentleman, the kind who still wears suspenders and absolutely refuses to trust cloud storage, but who guards his client loyalties as if they were buried treasure. "Connie?" His voice sounded genuinely surprised. "I was under the strict impression you were still recovering in the hospital. Robert called my office yesterday claiming that you might not be in the right mental condition to manage your assets anymore, and that they urgently needed me to draft a new power of attorney." I felt a sudden sharp pang deep in my chest, but it was not physical pain. It was the ultimate confirmation of my own diagnosis. Robert, my firstborn son, the little boy who once glued some dry macaroni to a piece of paper for me, a drawing I kept safe for 20 years, now actively wanted to declare me legally incompetent. "Listen to me very carefully, Mr. Reynolds," I said, and my voice did not waver for a single second. It came out with the exact same iron firmness of a woman who has barked orders at 50 waiters during a 1,000-person wedding reception. I am currently at my house. I am completely lucid, and I am absolutely furious. I need you to immediately freeze any and all power of attorney documents I have ever signed in the past. I want you to completely revoke every single authorized signature on both the business accounts and my personal accounts. And I want you to start drafting a full, comprehensive inventory of all my assets. But Connie, doing that is going to completely paralyze your children financially. Mark uses your secondary debit card for all his daily expenses, and Robert's hardware store is directly linked to your personal line of credit as his main guarantor. Exactly, Mr. Reynolds. That is exactly what I want to happen. Cut off their oxygen completely. If they call your office, tell them the bank initiated a mandatory audit due to suspicious account activity. Do not mention my name at all. I want to watch them sweat. I hung up the cordless phone with a deep level of satisfaction I had literally never felt before. It was a bizarre mix of maternal guilt and pure, unadulterated divine justice. For years, my hard-earned money had been the oil that kept their messy lives running without squeaking. Now, I was about to dump a giant bucket of sand straight into their gears. Right at 10 in the morning, the very first act of the show officially began. I was sitting comfortably in my reading chair, perfectly hidden behind the sheer lace curtains, when I saw Robert's truck pull up. He parked terribly, blocking half of my driveway with the sheer arrogance of someone who genuinely believes they own the property. He hopped out of his vehicle, talking loudly on his cell phone, gesturing wildly with that fake sense of self-importance he loves to project. I watched him casually stroll up to the front door. He pulled out his massive keychain, the one packed with dozens of useless keys just so he looks like a busy man, and confidently selected the key to my house. He slid it right into the deadbolt. He turned it. Stuck. He turned it again. Stuck. From my hidden spot at the window, I watched his brow furrow in deep confusion. He pulled the key out. He stared at it as if the piece of metal itself was somehow to blame. He literally blew into the lock mechanism and tried again. He shoved his shoulder hard against the heavy wooden door. Absolutely nothing happened. Arthur the locksmith's shiny new masterpiece held strong, completely unbothered. Robert started banging his fist against the solid wood. "Mom, Mom, open up, it is me!" he yelled at the top of his lungs, even though he was supposed to believe I was still lying in a hospital bed. And right there was the trap. If he honestly believed I was hospitalized, why on earth was he trying to break into my house with such frantic urgency? If he was just stopping by to water the plants, he did not need to scream. He was coming to look for something specific. He was coming to finish the shameless looting that Mrs. Martha had rudely interrupted. I gave a quick hand signal to Gretchen. She stepped right up to the front door, but she did not unlock it. She simply spoke right through the thick, solid wood, using her booming baritone voice. "This private property is currently locked down. Absolutely no visitors are permitted." I saw Robert literally jump backward in shock. "Who is that? What are you doing in there? I am Robert, the property owner's son. You better open this door right now or I am calling the cops." Mrs. Connie has retained private security to guard the premises for the entire duration of her medical convalescence. Gretchen lied, with a terrifying level of natural smoothness. "Nobody enters this property without explicit, notarized written authorization. What, security? But my mom is in the hospital." Robert was turning bright red with pure anger. Sweat was actively dripping down his temples. "Just let me in to grab some important paperwork." "Negative. Vacate the premises immediately, or I will trip the silent alarm." Robert furiously kicked a pot of geraniums before storming back to his oversized truck. I watched him punch a number into his cell phone with aggressive rage. My own phone, which was sitting on silent mode right in my lap, instantly lit up. Incoming call. Robert, oldest son. I let it ring and ring until it went straight to voicemail. Then I waited exactly 2 agonizing minutes and sent him a carefully calculated text message specifically designed to sow absolute chaos. "Son, I am so sorry I cannot answer the phone right now. They are doing some incredibly painful medical tests on my leg. The doctor says they might actually have to sedate me for a few more days. By the way, I hired a private agency to watch over the house because I had a terrible nightmare that someone broke in and robbed me. Do not worry about coming by to water the plants. They are taking care of everything. I love you." I watched from the living room window as he read the long message sitting inside his truck. The sheer utter confusion on his face was absolute poetry. If I was lying sedated in a hospital bed, who on earth had just given those direct orders to the security guard? And if there was hardcore security, how was he going to break in and steal the bank documents he desperately needed to cover his mounting debts? He aggressively started the truck and peeled out, leaving behind a thick cloud of black exhaust smoke. Phase 1, successfully completed. The physical fortress was completely impenetrable. Now it was time to initiate Phase 2, the total financial siege. I made myself a soothing cup of linden tea. I really needed to calm my nerves, not out of fear, but because of the rushing adrenaline. It was incredibly strange, but I genuinely felt more alive right now, actively conspiring against my own flesh and blood than I had in the last 10 years of being a loving, submissive mother. Right around noon, my cell phone started vibrating so hard it looked like it was having seizures. First it was Allison, incoming call. Allison, the spoiled princess. I picked up the line using my absolute weakest, most shaky voice, a performance entirely worthy of an Academy Award. "Hello, sweetie?" "Mom, what is going on with the credit cards?" she shrieked into the phone, without even bothering to ask how my health was. "I am standing right here in the middle of the grocery store with a totally full cart, and the cashier is telling me the card was declined for insufficient funds or a preventative security block. This is so humiliating, Mom. There are people staring at me." "Oh, my goodness, sweetie, I do not know," I said, forcing a weak little cough. "It is just that, well, the bank actually called my hospital room. They said there were some very strange transactions on the accounts, almost as if someone was spending a whole lot of money while I was actively in surgery. And since I could not verify anything, I think they just locked everything down for security reasons." "But I am your daughter." "It is not a robbery," she practically squealed. "Fix it right now. Call the bank this instant. I need to pay for the whole month's groceries." "I simply cannot, honey. I do not have my paperwork here with me. I left it all at the house, locked inside the safe in the kitchen, and since I cannot walk yet, you are just going to have to wait until they finally discharge me, or you can just pay for it with your own money, my sweet girl." "I am sure you have plenty of savings." There was an absolute dead, sepulchral silence on the other end of the line. Allison did not have a single dime in savings. Allison lived strictly paycheck to paycheck, using her husband's money and my generous monthly allowances. "But, Mom," her tone completely shifted. Now it was a pitiful, desperate whine. "I do not have any cash on me. How can you just abandon us like this?" "I am so sorry, honey. My hip is hurting me so much." "I have to hang up the phone now. The nurse is coming in to give me an injection." I hung up the phone. I closed my eyes and took a very deep breath. I vividly pictured Allison having to hand back all the expensive luxury items she always loved to buy, the imported wines, the fancy gourmet cheeses, while all the annoyed people waiting behind her in line sighed heavily. A tiny little dose of basic humility would not hurt her one bit. Exactly 10 minutes later, it was Mark's turn. "Hey boss, what is the deal? I just went to the ATM to take out some cash for some important medicine I was going to buy for you." And the machine literally swallowed the debit card. The screen says it was confiscated by the account holder's orders. "What did you do?" The blatant lie about buying me medicine actually hurt worse than the invasive hip surgery. Mark had never bought me so much as a single aspirin in his entire life. "Mark, my son, Mr. Reynolds just told me there is a massive bank audit going on. Apparently they detected that someone withdrew $1,000 on the exact same day I was being operated on. Do you know anything about that?" Nope. "How could you even think that? It was probably just a glitch in the bank's computer system. But Mom, I really need some cash right now. It is super urgent. I have a massive debt an important commitment." "I am so incredibly sorry, son. But until the bank properly clarifies exactly who stole that money, every single account is completely frozen." Mr. Reynolds says that if it was a robbery, they are going to review the ATM cameras and they will put the thief in jail. I heard how Mark swallowed hard on the other end of the line. Fear is a powerful motivator. Oh, okay. Well, let them check. Hey, and when are you getting out? We need to see you. Soon, son. Soon. Afternoon fell over the house. The golden light filtered through the blinds, illuminating the dust floating in the air. I felt like a spider in the center of its web, feeling the vibrations of every single thread my prey touched. Gretchen helped me walk around the living room a little bit. The pain was intense, stabbing, as if I had a burning nail right in the joint. But I forced myself to take 20 laps. I had to be strong. I could not let them see me weak when the time came for the face-to-face confrontation. "Ma'am, there has been a car parked in front of the house for half an hour," Gretchen warned me, looking through the peephole. I approached the monitor of the security cameras I had installed a year ago, which my children thought did not work because they assumed Mom did not know how to use technology. It was all 3 of them. They were on the sidewalk, arguing. Robert was waving his hands and pointing at the house. Allison was crying, wiping her tears with a silk handkerchief, probably bought with my credit card. Mark was smoking nervously, looking everywhere, as if he expected the police to show up at any moment. They did not know what to do. Their source of income had dried up all at once. Their access to the gold mine, my house, was completely blocked by an armored door and a military nurse. And their mother, the supposed senile victim, was giving them excuses that, although logical, were starting to smell incredibly fishy. I decided it was time to tighten the screws a little bit more. I opened the Family United group chat. I typed, "Children, the doctor tells me that my recovery will be long and very expensive. I am thinking about selling the house to pay for the medical bills and a nursing home. This way I will not bother you since you all work so hard. Tomorrow I will tell Mr. Reynolds to put up the for sale sign." I hit send. On the security monitor screen, the reaction was absolutely instantaneous. All 3 of their phones rang at the exact same time. I saw how they read the message. Allison covered her mouth with her hands. Robert turned completely pale, even through the black and white image on the camera. Mark threw his cigarette straight to the ground. Selling the house, their precious inheritance, their safety net. They started banging on the door and the doorbell rang frantically. "Mom! Mom, we know you are in there," Robert yelled, losing all his composure. "The neighbors saw you arrive in a cab. Open the damn door." The element of surprise had been broken. Some gossipy neighbor, probably the one from number 47 who was always sweeping the sidewalk, had told them. It did not matter. In fact, it was actually better. Now they knew that I had lied to them. They knew that I knew. I made a hand gesture to Gretchen. "Do not open it, just activate the intercom." I approached the device hanging on the wall in the entryway. I leaned heavily on my walker. I took a deep breath so my voice would not sound like crying, but rather like a strict sentence. I pressed the button. "Stop banging on my door as if you were debt collectors," I said. My voice sounded amplified and metallic out on the street. The silence outside was completely immediate. "Mom," Allison's voice was trembling, "why are you lying to us? Why will you not let us in? We are worried about you." "Worried?" I asked, letting out a dry laugh. "Worried like on day 1 when I was all alone? Or worried like on day 12 when the nurse thought I was homeless?" "Mom, there is an explanation for all of that," Robert started, using his negotiating businessman tone. "I do not want any explanations, Robert. I want hard facts. And the facts are that the 3 of you left me tossed aside like an old piece of furniture until you needed to dig some paperwork out of my kitchen." "We were not taking anything," Mark yelled, completely betraying himself. "We just wanted to tidy up." "Listen to me very carefully," I interrupted them, feeling the absolute power flowing through my veins, hot and intoxicating. "This house is mine. The money is mine, and my patience is completely gone. If you ever want to step foot inside this house again in your entire lives, you are going to have to earn it." "What are you talking about? We are your children," Robert said, completely indignant. "Exactly. You are my children, and for that exact reason, it hurts me even more to slam the door right in your faces. But the door is locked, Robert. And the bank accounts are locked too." There was a low murmur outside. They were deliberating. "Mom, please," Allison tried, softening her voice. "Let us talk. Just let us in. We will make you some tea. We will take care of you." "I already have someone to take care of me, and I am paying for it myself because your promises are not even worth the air you waste saying them." I took a dramatic pause. I knew exactly what was coming. I knew exactly what their biggest fear was. "Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, Mr. Reynolds is coming over. I am going to completely rewrite my will." "If you want to be a part of that meeting, you have to bring me something." "Bring you what?" the three of them asked, almost in perfect unison. "I want the car keys for the vehicles I loaned to each of you. I want the receipts for absolutely everything you have spent on my credit cards over the last year. And I want Mark to return the $1,000 he took out of the ATM, in pure cash." "That is impossible," Mark yelled. "I do not have that kind of money." "Then you better start looking for it under some rocks, son. Because if that cash is not sitting on my table by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, your name disappears from my will forever. And that goes for all three of you." I let go of the intercom button. The silence on the street was incredibly heavy. I could literally feel their deep desperation radiating right through the brick walls. I had given them an impossible ultimatum, but a completely necessary one. I needed to see exactly how far they were willing to go. I needed to see if there was even a single ounce of dignity left in them, or if they were just parasites clinging to their host. I stepped away from the door. I was exhausted. My hands were shaking, but this time it was not from rage, but from the sudden release of intense tension. I let myself fall onto the sofa. Gretchen was looking at me with a completely unreadable expression, but I could swear I saw a tiny flash of deep respect in her hard eyes. "Should I bring you something for the pain, Mrs. Connie? Bring me the folder that is in the safe. I need to go over the numbers." While Gretchen went into the kitchen, I looked at an old framed photo hanging on the wall. It was the four of us, 30 years ago. I was smiling, hugging three small children. We looked genuinely happy. We actually looked like a family. A single solitary tear rolled down my cheek. I wiped it away furiously. There was absolutely no time for nostalgia. Nostalgia is a luxury I could not afford if I wanted to survive this whole ordeal. Outside, I heard the engine of Robert's truck roar to life with violence. They were leaving, but they would definitely be back. Vultures always come right back when they smell dead meat, but tomorrow when they returned, they would not find any roadkill. They would find a fierce lioness fiercely defending everything she built with her own bare claws. And I had an ace up my sleeve that they could not even begin to imagine, the $2 million cashier's check. If they thought today had been brutal, they had absolutely no idea about the massive storm that would break loose tomorrow when Mr. Reynolds opened his leather briefcase. Because there was one big thing I had not told them yet. The sale of my catering business included a strict confidentiality clause that officially expired tomorrow. Tomorrow, they would finally find out that their mother was not just some frail little old lady with a broken hip. Tomorrow they would find out that I was a multi-millionaire, and I would get to watch their faces morph from pure anger into the most wretched, disgusting greed. And then, only then, would I deliver the final crushing blow. "Gretchen," I called out as I opened the blue folder, "brew some extra strong coffee for tomorrow morning. We are going to have some guests. And please make sure there are plenty of disposable tissues. There is going to be a whole lot of crying in this living room." The wall clock, that old pendulum piece my husband bought at a flea market 30 years ago, read exactly 9:55 in the morning. Its rhythmic ticking echoed through the room like the heavy footsteps of a judge approaching the bench. I was sitting straight up in my wingback chair, not wearing my sick patient robe, but a sharp navy blue tailored suit I used to wear to close massive catering contracts with the big hotels. I had done my hair. I had put on a little blush to hide the pale skin from my 15 days locked in a hospital room. And above all, I had put on my pearls. Pearls are not worn to beg for any kind of clemency. They are worn to hand down a sentence. To my right stood Gretchen, as firm as a granite statue, with her arms crossed over her immaculate white uniform. To my left, sitting at the dining room table we had cleared off specifically for the occasion, was Mr. Reynolds, reviewing his paperwork with that completely unshakable calm that comes from 40 years of courtroom litigation. 5 minutes left, Connie, Mr. Reynolds muttered without even looking up. Are you absolutely sure about this? Once I open this folder, there is no turning back. Family either breaks or it welds back together, but it never ever stays the same. My family shattered the day I had to beg a complete stranger to buy me a bar of soap because my own children were too busy, Mr. Reynolds, I replied, smoothing out an invisible wrinkle on my trousers. I am not here to break anything today. I am just here to sweep up the broken pieces. At 10 o'clock on the dot, not a single minute more and not a minute less, the doorbell rang. It was not a normal ring. It was a rapid series of anxious, completely desperate pushes. Gretchen looked over at me, seeking my approval. I gave a slight nod. Open the door for them, but make them come in one by one. The first one to walk in was Robert, my firstborn. The man who constantly bragged about being the strong pillar of the family was wearing a severely wrinkled shirt and had dark circles under his eyes that reached halfway down his cheeks. He barged in like a tornado, completely ignoring Gretchen, and came straight toward me. "Mom, this is pure insanity!" he yelled, waving his cell phone frantically in the air. "I just had a payment to my vendors bounce. The hardware store's line of credit is totally frozen because you are the guarantor. Do you have any idea how much money you are making me lose?" Right behind him walked in Allison, dragging her feet, her eyes completely swollen from crying so much. She was not wearing any makeup at all, something completely unheard of for her. "Mommy!" she whined, letting herself collapse into one of the dining room chairs without even asking for permission. "Luke yelled at me today. We could not even pay the kids' private school tuition. He says that if you do not fix this right now, they are going to repossess our car." And finally, Mark, the youngest. He walked in, staring straight at the floor, with his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his torn jeans. He did not even dare to look me in the eyes. He smelled like stale tobacco and pure fear. "Sit down," I ordered. My voice was not a loud yell. It was a low, raspy tone, but it had the exact same effect as the crack of a whip. All three of them settled into the chairs around the table. Mr. Reynolds looked at them right over his reading glasses, like a strict teacher evaluating students who had just failed a major exam. "All right then," I said, resting my hands heavily on my walker. "I gave you a strict deadline. It is now 5 minutes past 10. Did you bring what I asked for?" Robert slammed his palm hard against the table. "For the love of God, Mom, stop playing these ridiculous games. We are your children, not your employees. Of course we did not bring the credit card receipts from a year ago. Who even keeps that stuff? And about Mark's money. It is just a misunderstanding." I looked directly at Mark. He shrank down into his chair. "Is it a misunderstanding, Mark?" I asked softly. "Is stealing $1,000 from your own mother's savings account while she is in surgery a simple misunderstanding?" Mark looked up, his eyes welling with tears. "Mom, it is just that I owed some money to some really bad people. If I did not pay them back, they were going to, you know. I thought you would not even notice since you have so much saved up in there. I swear to you I was going to pay you back as soon as this new business deal I am working on came through." "There is always a new business deal you are working on, isn't there?" I sighed heavily, feeling a sharp twinge of pain in my hip, but keeping my posture completely straight. "And you, Robert? Why did you try to break into my house with a locksmith yesterday afternoon, right before I even got here?" Mrs. Martha had told me absolutely everything. Robert turned bright red all the way to the roots of his hair. "I was just worried about your safety. I just wanted to see if you had left the stove on." "You were digging for bank papers in the kitchen to see if she left the stove on?" Mr. Reynolds chimed in, dripping with delicious irony. "Wow, Robert. I had no idea that printed bank statements could prevent house fires." The silence that followed was incredibly thick. You could literally cut it with a knife. My own children, the very people I had fed, clothed, and educated, were staring at me with a twisted mix of hatred and sheer desperation. They felt completely cornered, and the absolute worst part was that they did not feel a shred of remorse for having abandoned me in that hospital. They just felt rage because I had finally turned off the money tap. "Look," Allison said, trying desperately to soften her tone, putting on her good daughter voice. "Mommy, we understand that your feelings are hurt. We really do. Maybe we just got a little too comfortable. But you cannot punish us like this. We are your own flesh and blood. Please unlock the bank accounts, please. Luke is going to literally kill me." "Blood just makes you a relative, Allison. Loyalty is what makes you family," I replied. "And the three of you proved to me 15 days ago that your loyalty is strictly to my wallet, not to me as a person." I gave a nod to Mr. Reynolds. The big moment had finally arrived. The attorney slowly opened his leather briefcase. The sharp sound of the metal clasps echoed through the room like 2 gunshots. Click, click. He pulled out a thick blue folder, stamped with the logo of a highly prestigious notary firm on the front cover. "Your accounts are currently frozen because I am conducting a full forensic audit of Connie's assets," Mr. Reynolds explained in a flat, monotone voice. "But that is the least of your concerns. Your mother has explicitly instructed me to inform you of a very substantial change in her overall estate." My 3 children immediately leaned forward, looking like starving wolves catching the scent of wounded prey. The word estate always had that exact effect on them. "Estate?" Robert asked, narrowing his eyes. "What are you talking about? Are you going to sell the house?" "Mom, you cannot sell this house without my signature. Remember that it is tied up in the family trust." "The house belongs completely to me, Robert." I cut him off. "And I had that family trust legally revoked first thing this morning. But we are not talking about the house right now." Mr. Reynolds slid a piece of paper right into the center of the table. It was a clean photocopy of the cashier's check. "As you may know, or perhaps you do not because you never bothered to ask, your mother has dedicated the last 40 years of her life to Connie's catering. While you all thought she just made food for little parties, she actually built a highly successful brand. A brand that was officially acquired last week by a massive luxury hotel consortium." I watched Robert's eyes open as wide as saucers. He, who honestly thought he was a big-time businessman with his tiny neighborhood hardware store, knew exactly what that corporate name meant. You sold the business?" Mark stuttered out. "For how much?" "Read the figure on the paper, young man," Mr. Reynolds said, pointing at the photocopy. All 3 of them craned their necks to look. I saw the exact moment the massive number registered in their brains. I watched them physically count the zeros. 1, 2, 3, 6 zeros. 2, Allison whispered, bringing a trembling hand to her throat. $2 million? Plus ongoing royalties for the exclusive use of her recipes for the next 5 years, Mr. Reynolds added with a predatory smile. The air was sucked completely out of the room. My children sat there completely paralyzed, staring at the piece of paper as if it were a divine apparition. $2 million. For them, drowning in endless debt just trying to look richer than they actually were, that number was the instant solution to every single one of their problems. The golden ticket to the easy life they always felt they inherently deserved. The transformation was instantaneous and absolutely repulsive. Robert's face went from pure rage to a sickening, twisted kind of adoration. He stood up and rushed over to hug me, even though I stiffened up like a wooden board. "Mom, what absolutely incredible news! I always knew you were a complete genius," he exclaimed, trying to kiss my cheek. $2 million. With that kind of cash, we can massively expand the hardware store, open up new branches, make it the whole operation grow. I will manage all the money for you, Mom. You just rest, and I will take full charge of investing it so it multiplies. Allison magically dried her tears and smiled, showing all her teeth. "Oh, Mommy, I am so happy," she squealed. "We can finally buy that big house up in the hills, the one with the huge pool so you can do your water therapy. We will just move in with you to take care of you. I will care for you day and night, I swear it." Even Mark, the petty thief, smiled with sheer greed. "Boss, with that kind of money, I can pay off what I owe and have plenty left over to open that restaurant I always wanted. You will never have to worry about me again." I just sat there looking at them, quietly observing their grotesque little dance around the money. 5 minutes ago, I was just a crazy, vindictive old woman. Now, with $2 million sitting on the table, I was the highly revered matriarch, the genius, their ultimate savior. I did not feel any satisfaction. I just felt nauseous. "Silence," I said. I did not scream, but the raw authority in my voice was so strong that they shut up instantly. I shook off Robert's embrace with a sharp, aggressive jerk of my shoulder. "Sit down," I repeated. They obeyed, but this time with an electric anxiety, eagerly waiting for me to start handing out the loot. "It is quite curious," I began, looking them in the eyes one by one. 15 days ago, when I was stuck in a hospital bed peeing in a bedpan because I could not stand up, my business genius did not matter to you. When I spent 12 agonizing nights staring at the door just hoping to see a familiar face, my overall estate was not a topic of conversation. "Mom, we already apologized to you," Allison interrupted. "Shut your mouth." I slammed my walker hard against the floor. "I am speaking now." I took a deep breath, controlling the slight tremor in my hands. "You all look at this huge number and you see brand new cars, houses with pools, and wiped out debts. You see your entire future perfectly resolved. But I see something very different. I see the exact price of my loneliness. I see 40 years of grease burns on my arms, of waking up at 4 in the morning, of missing out on parties because I was working so you would never lack a single thing, and I see that I raised 3 absolute parasites." Robert went totally rigid. "Do not insult us like that, Mom." "It is not an insult, Robert. It is a factual diagnosis. And as such, it requires an aggressive treatment plan." I looked over at Mr. Reynolds and nodded. He pulled out another crisp document, 3 copies. He slid them right across the table toward them. "What is this?" "That is the final destination for all the money," I said, feeling a completely ice-cold calm wash over me. I actually thought about splitting it up. I truly did. Before my surgery, my big plan was to give you each $500,000 and keep the rest for my retirement. I just wanted to see you happy. I saw their greedy eyes light up at hearing the words $500,000. But then, 15 days passed. 15 days of total silence. 15 days of pathetic excuses. And I finally understood that if I handed you that money, I would only be funding your endless selfishness. I would basically be paying you to keep forgetting about me, but just doing it with full pockets. "So what are you going to do?" Allison asked, her voice cracking with very real, sheer panic. "I have officially established an irrevocable management and guarantee trust," Mr. Reynolds read aloud. "The entire capital amount, the $2 million plus all accruing interest, is completely locked down." "Locked down?" Robert jumped to his feet, absolutely furious. "That is completely illegal." That money is our birthright. It is my money, Robert. I earned every penny of it. I make the decisions, I snapped at him. And I have decided the following. Starting today, the monthly allowances are completely gone. No more co-signing for loans. No more rescuing you from your maxed-out credit cards. You are going to ruin us, Mark yelled out. No, Mark, you are going to ruin yourselves if you do not finally learn how to work. Or maybe you will actually learn how to survive, just like I had to do when your father died and left me completely broke with 3 little kids to feed. I settled back into the armchair, completely ignoring the sharp pain shooting down my leg. It was a clean, totally necessary pain. But I am not a monster, I continued. The trust actually has strict clauses, unlock clauses. All 3 of them leaned in again, absolutely desperate for any little crumb they could get. What do we have to do? Allison asked. It is quite simple, but for you 3, it will probably be the hardest thing you have ever done in your entire lives. For starters, Mark, you have exactly 1 year to pay me back the $1,000 you stole, plus interest, and it has to be money earned from a verifiable job with actual pay stubs. No more sketchy side deals. Mark turned completely pale. Real, actual work. Allison, I continued, you are going to learn how to live on just your husband's salary. If you want luxury items, you will have to get a job yourself. The clause states that you will only receive financial help for my grandchildren's education if you can prove you have generated your own steady income for 6 consecutive months. Allison opened her mouth, deeply offended. She had never worked a single day in her entire life. And you, Robert, I looked at my firstborn, the most prideful of them all. You are going to officially resign from being the administrator of my assets. In fact, you are going to sign the legal resignation of the power of attorney you held right here, right now. And if you want your hardware store to survive, you are going to have to present a real, viable business plan directly to me. And I will decide whether or not I want to invest, exactly as if I were a bank. And I am warning you right now, my interest rates are incredibly high for high-risk clients. You cannot do this to us, Robert bellowed. It is humiliating, having to beg you for permission like we are little kids. Not like kids, Robert. Like business partners. You all wanted the company money so badly, right? Well, welcome to the board of directors. Here, you are held strictly accountable, and your past performance has been utterly pathetic. Mr. Reynolds extended a shiny pen toward him. If you refuse to sign the acceptance of the trust conditions and the resignation of all previous powers of attorney, the lawyer said softly, Connie will instantly donate the entirety of the money to a foundation that helps abandoned elderly people. The formal donation document is already drafted up. It just needs her signature. It was a moment of absolute crushing tension. My children looked back and forth at each other. In their eyes, I saw the cold, hard calculation. They knew I was not joking around. They knew the self-sacrificing mother who forgave everything had completely died in that hospital room, murdered by their sheer indifference. The woman sitting right in front of them was a powerful, dangerous stranger. You have exactly 2 minutes, I said, glancing at the pendulum clock. You either sign the papers or I am calling the charity foundation. Mark was the very first to break. He grabbed the pen, almost snatching it away, and frantically scribbled his signature. He was absolutely terrified of his massive debts. Any tiny shred of hope, even a distant one, was way better than nothing. Allison cried silently, shedding tears of pure, unadulterated rage, as she signed with her careful, perfectly round handwriting. Robert resisted until the very bitter end. He looked at me with a hatred that froze my blood, the dark hatred of a man whose fragile pride had been deeply wounded. But he looked down at the massive check on the table, looked over at Mr. Reynolds, and knew he had completely lost. He signed with so much force that he literally tore the paper. "There you go, Mom," he spat the word out as if it were pure poison. "Keep your damn money. I hope it helps you buy some good company because we are never coming back." "I certainly hope so, Robert," I said, and for the very first time I smiled a completely genuine smile. Because the company you pay for is much more honest than the company that only shows up out of financial interest. At least Gretchen charges a flat rate to take care of me, and she actually does a great job. You three were charging me a premium just to love me, and you could not even fulfill your basic duties. Mr. Reynolds gathered up all the documents very quickly, tucking them away into his briefcase like a magician packing up his tricks. "This meeting is now officially adjourned," the attorney announced. Gretchen took a firm step forward and threw the front door wide open. The bright midday sunlight poured in, harsh and cruel, completely illuminating the defeated faces of my children. They walked out one by one, Mark with his head hung in shame, Allison sobbing with dramatic flair, Robert walking incredibly stiffly, refusing to even glance back. When the heavy door finally closed behind them, the silence returned to the house. But it was no longer a hollow, empty silence. It was a completely clean silence. I let myself fall back deeply into the armchair, feeling the adrenaline rapidly drain from my body, leaving me utterly exhausted. The heavy tears I had held back during the entire meeting finally spilled over, hot and completely silent. I was crying for the family I had lost, yes, but I was also crying from pure relief. Mr. Reynolds walked over and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "You were absolutely flawless, Connie. Like iron." "Like titanium, Mr. Reynolds," I corrected him, tapping my hip lightly. "I am made of pure titanium now." "So, what happens next?" he asked. "Are you really going to make them go through with all of that?" I dried my tears with the lace handkerchief tucked into my sleeve. I stared right at the $2 million check still sitting on the table. "Now, Mr. Reynolds, my true recovery finally begins. They have their strict conditions, I have my own life, and I have a whole lot of money to enjoy it with." "Gretchen," I called out. "Yes, ma'am." "Pack my suitcase. The big one. And call a travel agency. I have always wanted to see Italy. They say the Mediterranean air works absolute wonders for the bones." "But ma'am, what about your hip? Your physical therapy?" "I will do my physical therapy right in Rome, Gretchen. I will hire the absolute best physical therapist in all of Europe. After all, I can certainly afford it." I looked out the living room window. I watched Robert's big truck speed away. I saw Allison's beat-up car pull out, and I saw Mark walking slowly toward the public bus stop. They were leaving completely empty-handed, but carrying a lesson that was worth way more than those $2 million. Today, they had finally learned that you respect a mother not for her bank account, but for her sacrifice. And if they refuse to respect that sacrifice, they get cut right out of the will. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was already cold, but it tasted like sheer glory. It tasted exactly like absolute freedom. The war was officially over, and the commanding general, although badly wounded, was still standing tall with a completely full safe. "Italy," I whispered softly to myself. "Yes, I really like how that sounds. Arrivederci, my dear children." Rome has a stunning golden light right at sunset that looks unlike anything I had ever seen back in the city, not even on the clearest days of spring. Here, the sun reflects beautifully off the worn cobblestones and the ochre facades of the ancient buildings, giving absolutely everything an air of true eternity. I am sitting on a small terrace right near the Pantheon, with a large glass of red wine in front of me and a small plate of olives that Gretchen, my fiercely loyal military shadow, guards suspiciously to make sure I do not break my strict diet. 6 full months have passed since I walked out of that house carrying my suitcase and my completely rebuilt dignity. 6 whole months since I left my 3 grown children standing in my living room with their mouths hanging wide open and their pockets completely empty, digesting the single most expensive lesson of their entire lives. My titanium hip still protests sometimes with the thick humidity near the river. It is true, There are definitely mornings when getting out of bed requires muttering a few curses under my breath and making a considerable physical effort, but it is a totally different kind of pain. It is no longer the dull ache of total abandonment, nor the sharp, stinging pain of betrayal. It is the beautiful pain of just being alive, of moving my body, of walking down streets that have 2,000 years of deep history buried right under their stones. "Mrs. Connie, you just received an email from Mr. Reynolds," Gretchen says, placing the tablet on the small table with her usual drill sergeant delicacy. "He says it is the monthly progress report on the interns." That is exactly what we call them now, the interns. I put on my reading glasses, the ones hanging from a beautiful gold chain I bought at a vibrant market in Florence, and I tap the file open. The very first section is all about Robert, my oldest son, the man who used to genuinely believe he was the absolute king of steel and screws. Mr. Reynolds' report is incredibly concise, but extremely revealing. The hardware store is technically still open, but he had to drastically reduce his staff. Now it is Robert himself who has to roll up the heavy metal security gates right at 7 in the morning. It is Robert who physically hauls the heavy bags of concrete whenever his assistant calls out sick. Mr. Reynolds attached a picture he took very discreetly. You can clearly see my son wearing a completely sweat-soaked t-shirt, actively ringing up a customer with hands covered in thick black grease. I smile not out of sheer malice but out of pure poetic justice. Those filthy, dirty hands are the exact same ones that flat out refused to sign my hospital discharge papers because he had to do a store inventory. Now he finally knows exactly how much real, backbreaking work actually weighs. He's officially paid 2 full installments on the strict business loan that the company, my company, or rather my trust fund, provided for him. With incredibly high interest, of course. I keep scrolling down through the document. Allison, my spoiled princess with the perfectly painted nails. Allison has finally discovered that while culinary talent can be inherited, true discipline has to be forged in the fire. As a mandatory part of the deal to keep from losing her kids' school tuition, she had to generate her own verifiable income. She started selling homemade desserts to all the wealthy moms at the private school, those exact same women she used to desperately try to impress with expensive designer handbags. Mr. Reynolds says that at first she was completely embarrassed to even ask them for money, that she practically hid from them, but sheer financial necessity is a wonderful, miraculous cure for vanity. She actually has a little Instagram page now, Grandma Connie's Desserts. She had the absolute nerve to use my own name. At first it really annoyed me, but then I thought, let her use it. Let that name remind her every single day exactly who she truly owes her survival to. The report indicates that she now wakes up at 5 in the morning just to bake. Her fingernails are no longer long or fake. They are filed completely short and probably smell constantly like vanilla extract and fresh yeast. Welcome to the real world, my dear daughter. And finally, Mark, the youngest, the petty thief, the eternal overgrown teenager. His specific section is actually the most surprising of all. Mr. Reynolds tells me that Mark got a job working at a massive wholesale grocery warehouse, physically loading heavy crates of fruit. It is brutal, incredibly low-paying, exhausting manual labor. He lasted exactly 2 weeks before he quit. I honestly thought that was the end of it, that he would immediately go right back to his sketchy old ways, but no. The sheer, terrifying fear of being permanently disinherited actually moved him. He managed to get another job, this time working as a delivery driver on a cheap motorcycle. He has officially returned $200 of the principal debt, Mr. Reynolds writes, paid entirely in small denomination bills, crumpled up and smelling like city exhaust, but it is legally earned money. I close the tablet and take a very deep breath. The crisp air in Rome smells wonderfully like roasted espresso beans and blooming jasmine. I have not completely forgiven them yet. Forgiveness is a complex dish that has to be cooked over a very, very slow fire, much slower than my absolute best roasted chili stew. but the white-hot, incandescent rage I felt sitting in that empty kitchen has fully transformed into a kind of pedagogical calm. I am no longer their helpless victim. I am their strict teacher. And the harsh lesson they are learning right now is the one I really should have taught them 20 years ago. That money does not just magically grow on trees, nor does it sprout inside Mommy's bank account. "Good news, ma'am?" Gretchen asks, breaking me right out of my deep thoughts. She has changed a bit, too. She stopped wearing that stiff, overly starched white hospital uniform and now wears comfortable civilian clothes, although she still walks with that incredibly rigid military posture that easily scares away all the pickpockets on the subway. "Just fair news, Gretchen. Only fair. But my personal rebirth is not strictly limited to educating my adult children from a distance. The money from the sale of Connie's catering was just way too much to spend entirely on luxury travel and expensive wine, no matter how hard I tried. I vividly remembered my roommate in the hospital, Betty, and so many other frail women I saw wandering those sterile hallways, totally alone, desperately waiting for a family visit that was never, ever going to come, counting their spare pennies just to buy a bar of soap. That is exactly why I instructed Mr. Reynolds to establish the Silver Companionship Foundation. It operates right out of my old house. Yes, that exact same house my greedy kids wanted to sell so they could split the loot. Now, it is a fully functioning senior day center. I hired 3 registered nurses and a full-time social worker. We offer free transportation, hot home-cooked meals, and most importantly, genuine company to elderly folks who are convalescing and completely alone. Mrs. Martha, my gossipy old neighbor, is the honorary board president. She absolutely loves it. She sends me voice memos every single day telling me exactly who showed up, what they ate, and how she aggressively put the local vegetable vendor right in his place. Martha finally found a real purpose. And my house, which used to completely reek of deep loneliness and confinement, is now filled with vibrant life, the loud laughter of old folks, and the delicious smell of homemade stew. My children are strictly forbidden from ever stepping foot inside that house, unless it is to do unpaid volunteer work, and so far not a single one of them has dared to go. They are way too ashamed to look those elderly folks who are actually receiving help right in the eyes. I take a slow sip of my red wine. The flavor is incredibly robust and earthy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if they had actually shown up on that very first day at the hospital, if they had just been there, taking turns taking care of me exactly like they promised. I would probably still be standing in my kitchen with an aching hip, packing up plastic containers of food for them to take home, handing them loaned checks that would never be paid back, just being the useful, beloved little old lady for as long as I was good for something. That surgery broke my bone, but it completely cured my blindness. I look down at my hands. The dark age spots are definitely still there, and the old scars from the oven burns are too, but now they look very different to me. I am wearing a stunning amethyst ring that I bought for myself on the Ponte Vecchio Bridge. It is not an engagement ring. It is a promise ring to myself. People tend to think that at 68 years old, life is just a steep downhill slope, a slow, sad slide right toward the very end. They are so incredibly wrong. For me, it has been exactly like finally reaching the absolute peak of the mountain and, at long last, seeing the entire beautiful landscape. From way up here, my children's problems look incredibly small, necessary for their personal growth, sure, but they are no longer my urgent problems to solve. Tomorrow, we are taking a trip down to Naples. I really want to see the ocean. I want to eat pizza exactly where they invented it. And next week, I have a scheduled appointment with a brand new physical therapist who swears he can have me dancing the tarantella if I set my mind to it. And I am setting my mind to absolutely everything. My cell phone rings. It is a video call. I hesitate for a brief second. It is the Family United group chat. Before, seeing that specific name pop up on my screen used to give me massive anxiety, a desperate need to instantly fix their lives. Now it just generates a mild curiosity. I answer the call. 3 faces pop up on the small digital screen. They look very tired, they look a bit older, but they also look much more real. "Hello, Mom," Robert says. There's absolutely no arrogance left in his voice. There is respect, or maybe just fear. Either one works perfectly fine for me. "Hello, Robert. Hello, everyone." "What is going on? It is 8 o'clock at night over here. I am right in the middle of eating dinner." "We just wanted to say hi," Allison quickly chimes in. Her hair is pulled back in a very messy ponytail, and she actually has a smudge of white flour on her cheek. "And to tell you that the kids have been asking about you." "Tell them that Grandma is currently conquering Rome," I reply with a soft smile. "And tell them I will bring them plenty of fancy chocolates when I visit for Christmas." "You are coming for Christmas?" Mark asks, with a sudden bright glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Yes, I am, but I will be staying in a hotel. I want my own space. And I certainly hope that by the time I get there, Mark, that envelope with the debt money is a little bit fuller." "Yes, boss. I am working hard on it. My tips yesterday were actually pretty good." We talk for exactly 5 more minutes. There were absolutely no pathetic requests for money. There was no over-the-top drama. It was an uncomfortable, slightly awkward, but very real conversation. We are finally learning how to be a family again, but this time, it is strictly on my terms, under my rules. I am no longer the bank. I am the mother. And it turns out that the mother is much more demanding than the local branch manager ever was. I hang up the video call. Gretchen looks over at me and slowly raises her glass of water. "Cheers, General." "Cheers, Gretchen." I look out toward the open plaza. A lively group of street musicians starts playing a very cheerful song. I feel incredibly tempted to stand up and walk closer to them, despite the lingering pain, despite the heavy exhaustion. The old Connie who organized banquets for other people was left far behind in the city, safely stored away in dusty photo albums and old recipe books. The woman sitting right here under the beautiful Roman sky is someone entirely new, someone who finally discovered that her heart, exactly like her hip, absolutely needed to break so it could be replaced by something much stronger, much more durable, and infinitely brighter. I am made of titanium, and titanium does not rust, it does not bend, and above all, it shines brilliantly with its own light. I ask the waiter for the check with a simple wave of my hand. Tomorrow will be another beautiful day, another great discovery, another silent victory. Life, my true life, has only just begun, and this time the grand banquet is entirely for me.